Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books, number 48. Onward with the book train. So many wonderful books to talk about. The first book today is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, by Judy Blume, 1970. This is a children's book. I read it out loud to our students. Wonderful book. It's a novel about a girl growing up, and her period is coming, menstruation. And this is what girls go through as they becoming changing from girls to women. And she's trying to decide whether she wants to be Jewish or a Christian. So I imagine she had a Jewish background, but maybe she didn't want to be Jewish. Anyway, she talks about school, boys, parents. As they say in the Philippines, buhay, or life. Wonderful book. Judy Blume is an outstanding author of children's books. The next book is West with the Night by Beryl Markham, 1942. This is a beautiful book. The author was born in England in 1902 and moved with her father to East Africa in 1906. She was only 4 years old. Her childhood was on an African farm. Imagine Kenya, perhaps Kenya or Tanzania. She played with these local children, African children, and she was also involved in hunting animals. She, as an adult, she trained racehorses and became a pilot. She had a very full life. Lots of nature, lots of danger. She actually flew an airplane from Kenya to England over the Sahara Desert. Just imagine. Wow, really something. She had encounters with elephants, lions, and baboons, and faced death many times. She had a very strong spirit. Wonderful book. Really, really good. Really enjoyed this one. The next book is The Eden Express by Mark Vonnegut, 1975. Very interesting book. The author is the son of the famous author Kurt Vonnegut, and Kurt Vonnegut was popular back in the 1970s. He wrote, I think, Slaughterhouse-Five and what were the other books by Kurt Vonnegut? And anyway, his son, Mark Vonnegut, became a hippie and was really into casual sex and drugs and became mentally ill. You think there's a connection? I think so. Yeah, so many people in the 1960s, the whole what they call the sexual revolution, and then the heavy use of drugs, marijuana, LSD, and is it any wonder that we have a mental health problem in the United States today? And I strongly believe there is a connection, and it's no accident, because what are you doing to your brain? And there are reasons why breaking the laws of God against sex is not just something to indulge in with many different people outside of marriage. That's why the whole idea of that thou shalt not commit adultery, and that anyway. So he testified, or this is a story of what sex and drugs can lead to, mental illness. He was on a commune in the wilderness in British Columbia, Canada. Very creative, philosophical, crazy book. Really interesting. Really enjoyed this book. It's a real warning. The next book is School Days, Who Ran My Underwear Up the Flagpole by Jerry Spinelli, 1992. Wonderful children's book. I read it out loud to our students. And it's a tremendous book. The Lives of Children. School, football, boys and girls, humor and trouble. Very good. Very lot of humor. Wonderful story. Jerry Spinelli is a fine children's book author. The next book is All-American Dream Dolls by David Haynes, 1997. I believe this is a novel, a successful black American woman, African American, who has a midlife crisis. She comes home to her mother and watches television and as they say, pigs out. She was eating a lot. Her 12-year-old sister is mean and in beauty pageants. Anyway, Deneen is this character, has a great spirit. Very entertaining story. Good story. Really enjoyed it. The next book is Fifth Quarter, The Scrimmage of a Football Coach's Daughter by Jennifer Allen, 2000. Oh, I love this book. Beautiful book. And the author is the daughter of George Allen, who was I remember well, from the 1970s. He was the NFL coach for the Washington Redskins. And so she's writing about her childhood. Her father's a famous guy, famous NFL coach. And it's the reality of fame, that this guy, he was a good guy, but this is all consuming, his work as an NFL coach. He didn't have much time for his family. And actually, I think, the desire for fame is pretty universal. Most people are. That's why you have sports fans. They're attracted to fame. And I've been, of course, I'm one of those people. And I found this book helping me to let go of my desire for fame, because she talks about the hard times they had. And some of the people, Roman Gabriel, who was a quarterback, and also Billy Kilmer. George Allen was driven, and he reached the Super Bowl. I guess he didn't win it. But anyway, and she's writing about her father. It's a loving story. She loved her father, and he was a good guy, and despite everything, despite his his ambition, and so this is kind of she wrote this for her father to talk about him and pay her respects to him, and this was his life, and he was a good guy, but it was tough. It was tough. The next book is Henry and Ribsy by Beverly Cleary, 1954. Beverly Cleary is an outstanding children's book author. I read this out loud to our students. It's about the old days. This character, Henry, gets in trouble with his dog. I think Ribsy was his dog. And anyway, talks about friends, getting haircuts, fishing, and growing up in a small town. That's what they used to say in the old days when children they didn't want to go to school. They called it playing hooky, and they'd go fishing. I'm not sure if they do that so much anymore. A little bit, I live across the street from a pier. Anyway, Henry and Ribsy is a wonderful children's book. Really enjoyed it. The next book is Namath, a biography by Mark Kriegel, 2004. This is a wonderful book, tremendous book. It's the biography of Joe Namath, who was an NFL quarterback, primarily for the New York Jets. And back in the 70s, when I was growing up, and to me, he was the coolest guy in the 1970s. Such a cool guy. He's the first player to wear white shoes in the NFL. If you watch the old games when he was playing early on, all the other guys had black shoes. And then he in his contract, he wanted to wear white shoes. And eventually the white shoes became pretty popular. And he was in television commercials, especially for Noxzema shaving cream with Farrah Fawcett. And then there's this, says, watch Joe Namath get creamed. And so she's putting this, there he is, he's smiling, and she's putting this shaving cream on him. Anyway, it's the story of his life. He, tremendous athlete. He came from a broken home. Very sad. His parents broke up. And then later he became a playboy. He had all these women in his life, which was too bad. He was famous. He didn't want to get married. He'd go from woman to woman. And then finally, he decided he wanted to get married. So when he was a little bit older, and I think he was retired from football, and he found this woman, and then she left him. Yeah, and he was jilted by his wife. He left her. Anyway, he was a very, very good father, really devoted to his I believe 2 daughters. Eventually, he developed alcoholism, and I remember watching Monday Night Football, and there was back in the 90s maybe, and I was home visiting, and they said, the announcer said, they sent it down to Susie, a woman named Susie, she was interviewing Joe Namath on the field, and she said to him, so Joe, what do you think of the Jets offense? And Joe says, I don't care about the Jets offense. I could care less about the Jets offense. I want to kiss you. So he was drunk. And after that, he realized he had a problem. He went into rehab, and he quit drinking. He's still alive. He's an old guy now, and his daughters have grown up. He's a good fella. Won the 3rd Super Bowl. He's the guy who said, the Jets are going to win. I guarantee it. Anyway, he was a cool guy. Very interesting story. Joe Namath, the amazing NFL quarterback back in the late 60s into the 70s.
The next book is Ships and Men of the Great Lakes by Dwight Boyer, 1977. This is a really good book, mostly about these big ships. They're called them iron ore freighters. They would carry iron ore from the up north in Minnesota, the Mesabi iron ore range, down south to the steel mills in Lake Michigan and Lake Erie. Anyway, it talks about some of the ships that sank, seamen who died. The Irving S. Olds, actually one of the ships. I worked on that ship, 1979, 1981, two college summers. And I met these fellows. Sam Gianakura was the cook, and James A. Sutton was the assistant cook. I worked with him. I worked in the kitchen, called the galley. And then there's this famous song by Gordon Lightfoot about the Edmund Fitzgerald that sank in a bad storm, and he talks about of the big lake they call Gitchagumi. I guess the Chippewa Indians they called that was Lake Superior, and they shining big seawater, Lake Superior. And then when the gales of November come early, fellas, it's too rough to serve you. Fellas, it's been good to know you. The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Bells tolled 29 times for the wives and the sons and the daughters. I'm sorry, that was a terrible rendition of that song, the Edmund Fitzgerald. Maybe you can Google it. But anyway, so this is a good book about the Great Lakes, because I live right now across from Lake Erie, and it's the largest area of freshwater in the world. Yeah, all these lakes that are all freshwater from the Ice Age. It was melted snow.
The next book is Arctic Dreams, Imagination and Desire in a Northern Landscape by Barry Lopez, 1986. Wow, what a book. You know, the Arctic. I've been very interested in the Arctic and the Antarctic. And parts of this were boring. I was glad I got through it. And the search for the Northwest Passage, he talks about that, you know, when Europeans came to America. And, of course, there is no Northwest Passage. Well, no, actually there is, but it's way far north. Not very practicable because it's frozen most of the year, and it's, but they did find it. This guy found it. I think I read another book about that. Very interesting, you know, because it's really not commercially viable. You wouldn't want to go that far north and now we have the Panama Canal, so it's no longer relevant, along with airplanes and railroads and automobiles. Anyway, this is a philosophical, scientific kind book. He talks about whales, Eskimos, the white men, really cold place. And so, fascinating part of the world, the Arctic Ocean, on the top of the world. Very interesting. The next book is Ann Vickers by Sinclair Lewis, 1932.
Yeah, Sinclair Lewis is this tremendous author from years ago, classic author from, back in the 20s into the 30s. I saw a biography of him recently, and apparently had a very sad life. Kind of shows that fame, he was famous, wealthy and famous, but I think he had alcoholism as well. Anyway, in 1995, I was visiting my parents here in Rocky River, and I ordered it at a bookstore, and then I actually had to fly back to the Philippines, so my dad went in, he paid for it and mailed it to me, and I had it for many years, and finally read it in 2009. Anyway, I believe it's a fictional book about Ann Vickers, this character who's really amazing. Born in 1890, died in 1932, and she fought for women's right to vote and worked to improve conditions in prisons in New York City. Wow, strong, dedicated woman. Has a happy ending. Her beloved Barney was released from prison, and they were together with their son Matt. Beautiful book. I really enjoyed Ann Vickers. And Sinclair Lewis is an incredible author. Really, really something. The next book is The Secret Life of Dilly McBean by Dorothea Hass, 1986. It was a children's book. I read it out loud to our students. And this boy, his parents died, and he has magnetic power. And he moved to a new place. So that's about all I can tell you about, because I don't remember anything more, but I know I enjoyed it very much. The next book is Escapade, an autobiography by Evelyn Scott, 1923. So this is an old book. That's a long time. That's almost 100 years ago. And it's a true story. In 1913, the author was, she was 21 years old. And she was pretty rebellious, you could say, free spirit, and wanted to get away from her controlling family. So she ended up moving to Brazil with a 40-year-old man, and they lived in severe poverty, near death and insanity. And what surprised me is she did not seek God. Very puzzling. However, she was a very strong-willed woman. And I can't remember how she moved back to the U.S., but she really went through hard times in Brazil because, it's a poor country and you got to make a living. And I guess the guy she was with wasn't so good at that. Very interesting story. The next book is The Case for Christ, a journalist's personal investigation of the evidence for Jesus by Lee Strobel, 1988. This is a good book. It was given to me by my family friend, Phyllis Oblander, who was a very good friend of my sister Pamela. And one of the things I thought was real interesting about African slavery. We know that 11 million Africans were shipped to America, and their descendants, are in the United States, Brazil, the Caribbean, and so forth. However, 13 million Africans became slaves and were shipped to countries in the Arab world. Very interesting, and I guess if you go to those countries today, you'd see dark-skinned people with African features. Anyway, the death of Jesus, when he was crucified, was excruciating on the cross, and this pain through his wrist, very painful, but he fulfilled the Old Testament Messiah prophecies. Very interesting. So this guy was trying to, investigate for the historical evidence of Jesus Christ's life, aside from the Bible. The next book is Nice Guys Finish Last by Leo Durocher with Ed Lynn, 1975. Oh, I really enjoyed this book. This guy, Leo Durocher, he played on the 1927 Yankees, considered the greatest team of all time with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. 1934 Cardinals, who were also a tremendous team. And then I think he was the manager for the Dodgers in 1940 when they made the World Series. 1951 also. And then 54 Giants. I know they beat us. They beat Cleveland in the 54 World Series. He was a manager of the 69 Cubs who collapsed late in the year and had a very good year, but they lost a lot near the end. Didn't make it to the World Series. The 1973 Astros, that was the end of the line. He was an old guy then, couldn't deal with these young players who were not very respectful. So he played with Babe Ruth, Dizzy Dean, and he played at Ebbets Field, where the Brooklyn Dodgers used to play. Ricky, Pete Reiser, and Willie Mays, who was the star player on the Giants. Ron Santo on the Cubs, and Ernie Banks, and Cesar Cedeno is the guy on the Astros that finished off Leo Durocher, because he was such a kind of a tough guy to deal with, and again, not very respectful. Interesting fellow. The next book is The West's Last Chance. Will we win the Clash of Civilizations? ? By Tony Blankley, 2005. Wow, this is such a challenging topic. The war against the Islamic jihadists, these Muslim fellows who made war on the West. And the author talks about, the immigration into Europe, Muslim immigration into Europe, and, cultural problems. And it's a real test. Yeah, I know in Europe this is really tough because they come and they have their cultural issues, so it's hard for them to integrate with Europe. A lot of times they don't want to. They don't want to become European, and they're promoting hatred of Jews in Europe, anti-Semitism, which is a real problem. And sometimes, they actually even hate the country they're living in, and they want to take it over. I met a Dutch fellow in the Philippines, and he said that Holland was doomed because of that eventually Muslims would take over that country. They would use democracy to take it over. Anyway, it's very interesting. We should make friends with Muslims, absolutely, because I think they're victims actually of these severe cultural problems. At the same time, we should stand up. Definitely don't allow anti-Semitism to spread, because that's something very important to me. because Jewish Americans have contributed so much to our country, and we need to stand up for democracy and for freedom of religion. So, very interesting topic, very, very, very controversial, very challenging, very, very difficult. Anyway, we have to deal with it. The next book is The Folklore of Management by Clarence B. Randall, 1959. Well, I was teaching economics. That's why I read this book, and it's a very fascinating topic, in business, in companies, and how to manage employees. This would be. I don't have the book anymore. Her son Tim, he got into took business management. It's very important. How can you succeed as a company? You have to manage the employees well. They have to be corrected when they make mistakes, but also they have to be encouraged and be empowered and be patient with them. But also they have to do a good job. And how to motivate them. Very interesting topic. The next book is Catcher in the Rye: Outrageous but True Stories of Baseball by Bob Uecker and Mickey Herskowitz, 1982. Of course, Bob Uecker was a baseball player, played for the old Milwaukee Braves. He was a catcher, and then he became famous, as an announcer. I think he's been the Milwaukee Brewers radio guy for many years, and he's got into TV, and he's on these light beer commercials, and very funny. He'll be at a game, and he's sitting there, and the guy, in this commercial, and the guy will come up to him and say, "Sir, you're sitting in the wrong seat." And then Uecker says, "Well, I must be in the front row." He got like free tickets from somebody, and then next thing you know, he's way, way far up in the really cheap seats. So, and he was also in these major league movies about the Cleveland Indians, and he portrays the character Harry Doyle. Everybody loves Bob Uecker. Funny guy. Good guy. The next book is Unfinished Business: Afghanistan, the Middle East, and Beyond, Diffusing the Dangers That Threaten America's Security by Harlan Ullman, 2002. Again, this is another story, another book about the war against the Islamic jihadists. A world of trouble. Israel, Palestine, India, Pakistan. Removing the roots of terror, which are poverty and ignorance. And it's a very, very important topic, because ever since 9/11, I guess that's when people really realized that we have a problem. We have to deal with this. And I believe it's a cultural problem in Muslim countries. That cultures powerful and overwhelming, but cultures can change and need to change. The United States was a very racist country years ago. It was a cultural thing, and it changed. I'm sure there are some racist people, but overall we're not racist anymore, and we know that it's wrong to do that. So that's a good example of how cultures can change, and we need to change for the better, not for the worse. The next book is Antarctic World by John Euler, 1960. Oh, this is an outstanding book, and I'm very interested in Antarctica. Very cold. The author talks about exploration, penguins, whales, the extreme cold, science. Fascinating book. He also says that Antarctica might be an archipelago and not a continent, because all the snow. In fact, 90% of the world's snow and ice is in Antarctica. It's huge. It's like a mile high in some places. So it's hard to know what the landforms are underneath. And for example, if it all melted, that's what he's saying. It's an archipelago that we think of it as a big continent, but we don't really know because everything's frozen. Very interesting. The next book is The Worst Team Money Could Buy by Bob Klapisch and John Harper, 1993. This is the story of the 1992 New York Mets, who had the highest payroll in baseball, I think the highest ever, but they were a lousy team. And they had players like Bobby Bonilla, I think was one of the most expensive players. They paid a lot of money to him. He came over from Pittsburgh. Vince Coleman, Dwight Gooden, Willie Randolph, Jeff Torborg was the manager. Used to be Cleveland manager. Tom McCraw used to play for Cleveland. Brett Saberhagen. Just shows you can have a lot of money, but the guys got to play. In fact, last year, the Houston Astros are one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. They won the World Series. It shows that the teams that don't have much money, they can win if they're smart about how they spend their money, develop players, and have a good manager. Very interesting book. The next book is Veiled Threat, The Hidden Power of the Women of Afghanistan by Sally Armstrong, 2002. Wow, what a book. The book talks about how the women of Afghanistan suffered under the Taliban, who were the government from 1996 to 2001. And also how women, basically, because of culture, are abused in many, many Muslim countries. Female genital mutilation in Africa. But according to this book, Muslim and African women are fighting back. There's hope. And that, especially, and I think for those who are against the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, that war has been going on for so long, I know one thing, that the women of Afghanistan have benefited, at least in, and because the Taliban went to war with the women of that country. They were just these crazy guys, had these crazy ideas that the women could not work, they could not leave the home without a man. And some of it's very traditional beliefs. Again, it's cultural, but they took the traditional culture and made it really extreme. And all these women, they had a tough time. What happens if their husband had died? And you had women who were, working and who were doctors or whatever. Anyway, since the U.S. invasion, that changed, at least in Kabul and in the cities where women got more freedom back, and they let girls go to school again. They reopened schools for girls, and so that was a very good thing. And anyway, very interesting, because it's hard to know what's going on with women in Muslim countries because of lack of freedom. But you have to know that they really want change. They want to be able to contribute. When women are not allowed to work and are restricted, it's really a shame. And I think it's very hard for the country to develop because women can't contribute their talents. And then it's basically it's very sad because I think the whole thing keeps going because men enjoy having power over women in Muslim countries. It's very sad, because what a sad way to live. And the culture really promotes the abuse of women. This needs to change. But things change. Things take time. We have to be patient. And this is a troubled world. This is the way it is. So what are you going to do? Do your best, make a contribution, change yourself, and make a humble contribution through service work. The next book is When Chicago Ruled Baseball, The Cubs White Sox World Series of 1906 by Bernard A. Weisberger, 2006. Wow, very interesting book. The old days, too. Just imagine, 1906. That's 100 and some years ago. And the famous double play combination, Tinkers to Everest to Chance on the Cubs. Charlie Comiskey, the owner of the White Sox. Albert Spalding. You have the famous Spalding Sporting Goods Company today. Three Finger Brown, a guy he had in a hunting accident. He was a pitcher and he lost one of his fingers. One of his fingers was blown off and part of another, and so but he could still pitch. In fact, in a way, it helped him pitch. He got an extra spin on the ball. So the 1906 All Chicago World Series. Very, very interesting. Well, it appears we're out of time. Thank you very, very much for watching. I so much appreciate it. God bless you. I hope you find a good book to read, and I'll see you next time.